is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culchin Ford. Bird Culchin Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas, 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Bearcast here on SicEm365.com. I'm Craig Smoke, SicEm365 radio host, also team and recruiting reporter, joined as always by Grayson Grundhafer, director of broadcasting, also team and recruiting reporter for SicEm365. And this is the final podcast before we actually start talking about football games, because next week, starting really this weekend, but especially on Monday, Baylor will be firmly in the crosshairs of Texas State and vice versa. They will be packing up, getting ready for a trip to San Marcos to kick off the 2021 season. So a little bit of fall practice left to go, a little bit of basketball to talk about as well. But Grayson, before we dive into everything and knowing the season is right around the corner, how are we doing this week, man?
Yeah, doing great. Fall camp squarely underway, so we're definitely going to get to talk a little bit about that. First scrimmage over the weekend, and they'll have another one coming up this weekend, which I think will be a very telling time period for this Baylor football team going forward. The trip to San Marcos, I think, is squarely on everyone's mind, so I know I'm really excited about the season getting ready to roll, and I'm sure everyone else is as well. And there's also a little bit of basketball to talk this week, as some Baylor guys making waves in the NBA a little bit.
Yeah, there is, so we'll get to that as we move along here, but we're going to talk mostly football because that's what's coming up next, as we mentioned. And they did have their first scrimmage this past weekend. Since this weekend, we've heard from Dave Aranda. We've heard from some of the defensive backs. We've heard from a bevy of players over the last 3 weeks. Kind of hard to believe that fall practice has just started, and yet here we are, and they're about to take on a much more serious tone, whereas it's been, we're just working on things and we're just getting better and we're doing this. Now it's like, hey, now you got to name a starting quarterback soon. You got to actually go out and play and have results, or all this feel-good, foo-foo stuff is going to be all for naught. It's been nice to hear the positivity of the offseason, Grayson, but, it's ultimately going to be about wins. So based on the scrimmage this past weekend, what Dave Aranda and others had to say, what are kind of some of your takeaways on where they are here less than a week out?
So I think the first one that's extremely obvious is the defense is way ahead of the offense. Now, this happens often in camp. I would say that it usually is the norm, that the defense at this time is ahead of the offense. But I think in this particular situation, I think people get a little bit uncomfortable when you say stuff like that, because Baylor's had to deal with the offensive line problems for years. And so I think a lot of people want to hear the offense is thriving or really, coming together under Jeff Grimes. But I think the reality is this defense is in year number 2 under Dave Aranda. They have very good players. I mean, the talent level is just, it is what it is. They're very, very good and very deep and experienced all across the defense. And they really played well in this first scrimmage from everything I've heard, and the offense really didn't have an answer for it. And so I think this week it's going to be key that these quarterbacks and that this offensive line come together and really put together a much better performance, as Saturday is the last scrimmage before the school year starts on Monday. So it's a big time. I think this is pretty much getting to the end of fall camp, and the offense just has to find, it's not an identity, because they do have an identity, but it's more so the confidence to go out and put that identity on the field, even against a defense that I feel could be a top 10 defense in the entire country.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine it's kind of hard to have, full confidence when you don't know who your quarterback is.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I think, based on everything I've heard, no one established themselves this weekend.
Great.
And that's not good. No one really came out and really put together a dominant performance. There weren't many touchdown passes thrown. There was a pick six, obviously, that we saw in the video by Jacob Zeno. There was an interception thrown by Gary Bohannon, picked off by Jalen Petrie on a throw into double coverage. So 2 bad mistakes by both of them, but we also saw Jacob Zeno throw a touchdown to Monterey Baldwin, and Gary Bohannon led a nice drive that was capped off by an Abram Smith rushing touchdown, and I think that's good to see, that they did have success at times, but I would say in general, no quarterback really established themselves as the guy after this first scrimmage, and that leads you into the second scrimmage with it continuing to be completely open, and that's not great to hear, but I would also say that I think it does mean that there's truly a competition and a battle, and that the coaching staff still really doesn't know which direction they're headed.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at that. If you've got a bunch of quarterbacks, you don't have one quarterback, is one way to look at it if you want to be negative. You could say, well, yeah, they got a handful of pretty good guys, but they don't have a guy. Or also, if you want to be more positive, that, yeah, the competition's just so great, they can't pick a guy yet. And I hope it's more that than the other, but I don't know. It kind of seems like it's probably some more the other because, you'd think at some point, somebody's going to be an alpha dog and stand up and go, all right, nobody else wants to grab this job, I'm grabbing this job. And yet we haven't seen any indication. Now, granted, we don't get all the access. We don't get to watch practices and, everybody's saying the right things, but I just expected at this point for somebody out of the five guys to just jump up and be the guy, and that hasn't, from what we've been able to see at least, that hasn't come close to happening.
Yeah, I would say the worst thing that I heard coming off of the scrimmage was that the offense was flat. And I think that the part of it is it's not really, for me, if the offense isn't great, that's not really surprising. That's not something that I feel like is, surprising. I think, they were going to struggle. They will struggle at times this year. It's going to happen. First year with a new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, they're going to have growing pains. But when you hear flat, I don't understand that. You would think that the offense would come out and be really hungry to have a lot of success this season. And I think this will change as you start making bigger plays and having better moments. It helps. But these quarterbacks really need to step up in that department where they make sure that offense does not come out flat. That's the last thing you want to hear because we saw a flat offense every single game a year ago.
Yeah, if I have to watch a repeat of last year, which I'm not expecting, then that's going to be a difficult pill to swallow because there's nothing less inspiring than watching a team that doesn't look like they want to be there, and that's what the offense felt like last year. It just felt like, all right, let's get this series over with and get back to the sidelines. I mean, honestly, that's what it felt like after a while, just watching them, 3 and out, and then, let's throw a touchdown now. So I hope there's a bit more life with this offense than there was last year. And if there's not, then I don't know what the answer would be. I don't know if it's just clean out the quarterback room or what you'd have to do. But, I mean, at this point, it is somewhat concerning. Now, granted, too, they're playing a really good defense day in and day out in practice, and that's not going to exactly make you feel great, slamming into a wall over and over again or being blanketed in coverage, constantly. But at the same time, I'm sure that they just need a little bit of new scenery, and that'll provide a spark. But if it doesn't, then yeah, this is going to be interesting to see what happens ultimately.
Yeah. So while we're talking about quarterbacks, let's talk about some of the quotes that you wrote about with R.J. Sneed and Tyquan Thornton during their media session. We'll start with Gary. So Sneed said that everyone knows Gary has a bigger arm. Mm-hmm. That was his quote. I found that to be a little interesting. I think we know Gary has a big arm, but I think the foregone conclusion was that Jacob Zeno had the biggest arm. And I don't know that that's the case. Gary's a big dude. He can obviously sling it. The question has always been, can he be accurate with it? But a very big arm. And I thought that was encouraging to hear because I think the only way you see that he has a big arm is if you're working on that in practice, mm-hmm. and that has been an emphasis.
Yeah, I mean, we've only seen him throw 5-yard passes, basically.
Yeah. Or run it.
Or run the football on a very predictable play call where it's Gary Bohannon comes in, a run. But, yeah, we've seen him throw it a handful of times maybe. So, no, we don't have a great sample size.
Yeah, and then Jacob Zeno, he mentioned Jacob's just a guy where he's going to put it in the spot where it needs to be. I found that interesting because that speaks to accuracy. That speaks to being able to put the ball where it needs to be. The timing of the throw as well, I think, is a part of that. So I thought that was really interesting as well. And it kind of shows the two parallels between these quarterbacks and kind of the fact that they have shown things that maybe we haven't gotten to see from a spring game or from, what we've heard. And I thought that was a pretty encouraging comment about Jacob Zeno.
Yeah, I mean, all the positive comments, or all the comments have been positive, mostly for the quarterbacks. And yeah, those were interesting as well. I mean, just to get a little bit of a different perspective. I mean, they're all saying the right things. Yeah. It's just like, I don't know though. Especially Jacob Zeno. Like, I know you know him sort of well, and I mean, are you just surprised that he hasn't really reached up and grabbed this job and just taken it over at this point?
I am, and then I'm also not. It's just a weird situation because Gary's been there. It's not like Gary hasn't been there or hasn't tried to grow himself as a player, and it's also not like the offense is in a great situation where they can do whatever they want with the quarterback position. I mean, the offensive line is still a very big question mark, and after this scrimmage, it continues to be one. And I think I do think my expectation was that after the spring, Jacob would be in a great position to ultimately win the job. And I still think he is right there. I think everyone saw the spring game and they basically decided that Gary was going to be the quarterback. And I understand that. Gary played well in the spring game. I totally get that. But I also think it becomes pretty obvious that he didn't dominate throughout spring when he's not named the quarterback because he's the veteran on the team. Why wouldn't he have been named after spring football?
Right.
I don't know. I think it's just a completely open competition, but I think it's more disappointing that neither of them have done it. Not that just Jacob hasn't done it.
Yeah, I find it interesting after the Big 12 hoopla, with the appearance versus Oklahoma, and then just what's happened since then. It's just kind of interesting to see, a bunch of people convinced themselves that he was like the next great Baylor quarterback based on a small sample size, and rode with that all last year. Get Brewer out of there, and it's just interesting that all that occurred, and yet Zeno's here, and he's still in a fight a week before the season for the job against Gary Bohannon. So it's like
an all-out fight.
Yeah, like out. Not even, sort of indicating that he's in the lead. Like, no, there's not even an indication that anybody's in the lead right now.
Yeah.
It's just kind of funny to look back on all that hoopla and just kind of go, yeah, maybe people overreacted a little bit to that. You think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's also funny because I think we've gone through waves, haven't we, with these quarterbacks' momentum. I remember going in when Jeff Grimes took over, there was a lot of conversation about Blake Shapen being the guy. A lot of people were like, oh, he could be the next guy. He's got this moxie about him, this poise. He could be the guy. Then it was Jacob Zeno's having a great spring, has really taken over the position. Then the spring game happened. It's like, oh, everyone's on the Gary Bohannon hype train now, and that's where we're at, I think, still, is that everyone expects Gary to be the guy outside of a few people. And, I mean, we'll just see what happens. I do think that this weekend scrimmage is going to determine who gets the start for the Texas State game. And I am so curious to see what happens. I think it's going to be, I think Gary and Jacob, I'm gonna go ahead and just put this out there. I think they're going to play their best football on Saturday, and I think it's going to be an all-out war for who ends up getting the starting job versus Texas State.
Well, they better, or toss them both to the side, because, and I don't mean that literally, but I mean, Gary seems like a nice enough guy. Jacob seems like a nice enough guy, but like the time for nice is over. Like, get mad, get serious, get angry, and get that job. And, it's almost like kind of want somebody to just get fed up at this point and just be like, all right, I'm taking the team over, and this is going to be my offense. And you know what I mean? And yet it's niceties and it's great. There's chemistry on this team this year, and everybody loves each other, and all that stuff's good. And I think that'll probably end up, gaining them an extra couple of wins ultimately. But yeah, they got to have somebody step up at quarterback. I mean, this is fine that it's still unnamed or uncertain, but I think the concern is just for me that there's not like an edge to this thing, and I was hoping that there would be. And what I mean by that is it's just too nice. Like I need somebody to get pissed, and I need somebody to like I said, grab the bull by the horns.
I agree, because having a bunch of QBs equals having no QBs.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, Gary's okay, and Jacob's okay, and Blake's okay, and it's like, okay, but a bunch of okay quarterbacks does nothing for you in the long run. So yeah, I mean, we'll see if that changes in the next few days, but that's kind of where we are with the Baylor quarterback spot, in the same spot it's been in, really, depending on who you talk to, what rumor you've heard, or what your insider source says, this guy or that guy's leading the competition by today. And who knows by Saturday, and who knows by the Saturday that matters in San Marcos in 2 weeks. But as of now, no new insight really on the Baylor quarterback competition. Elsewhere, anything you heard of interest this week?
Yeah, so let's go to the running back position for a minute. So everything I heard over this weekend is that Trestan Ebner looked like a full-grown man, and that he is. I've been saying this for a while. I think that he is going to be their best running back this year. I don't think it's going to be that close, even though I don't know that means he'll have the most carries or most touches. Just because you want to keep him healthy. He's such a unique weapon, and I think he's playing his best football leading up to the season. And that's extremely important for Trestan Ebner, because it seems like every year he just starts dealing with some sort of injury. And I'm praying that doesn't happen, but right now he's in great shape. Abram Smith led the way as well on the ground. Those two guys, the 1-2 punch, it seems like that's going to be the guys that they ride during this season, at least for the beginning of it. And then also they're dealing with some guys who didn't play at the running back position as well. So that position needs to continue to get healthy because you don't want to have to rely on Jordan Jenkins to have to be your third running back when the season comes.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are pretty set with those two guys. I said in one of my previews that, Abram Smith's going to be kind of, in my opinion, the bell cow as far as just the normal 15 carries or whatever.
The love it role.
Yeah, he's going to be the regular running back. And, here's your 15, 20 carries, go left, right, up the middle, and then Ebner's going to be more of a dynamic, catching it out of the backfield and, doing a lot of that type of stuff. I'm sure he'll still get his share of carries, but if you look at the last couple, Ebner's never gotten a lot of carries. He's never been a bunch of handoffs in the backfield guy. He gets less than 10 a game. So I don't think that's going to change dramatically, but I do think he's going to be heavily involved in this offense in just a variety of different ways. And we also learned that there's some hope that Squirrel's going to be around. I mean, Dave Aranda won't answer the question outright, but did ask about Squirrel, and he mentioned that, people are clamoring for him to be in practice, and I don't know where he is in his timeline because, again, I can't get an answer to where he is in his timeline. But, what we have heard, you believe that he's going to be able to play this year. Does that mean the start of the season? I have no idea because, again, can't get an answer on really where he is. But Dave Aranda did say that, he loves that he runs like a tough guy, but he needs to learn that he's not, built like Abram Smith or Trestan Ebner, and that he's much different and that he needs to probably avoid a lot of contact. But I don't know. That was interesting to me. I don't know where Squirrel's status is, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him play this year based on what we've seen and heard and all of that.
Yeah, I think that he will play this year. I do not believe that he played in the scrimmage over the weekend, though. I think he was held out for that. So, again, he still needs to get fully healthy. That's always been an issue for him, and I don't think he'll be used in the same role maybe. Or I don't know that he'll be I think people are expecting him to possibly take over the Abram Smith role at some point during the year. I don't know if I see that. I think when you talk about a guy who's been banged up as many times as he has, I don't know how many touches you're going to give
Abram
him.
Smith's been described as a physical, violent downhill runner. That is not Craig Williams. That is not even close to Craig Williams.
What Craig Williams has that none of the other running backs, in my opinion, have shown, even a John Lovett, is his vision is very unique and his ability to make people miss in the hole. But he's not going to run over you like Abram or run through a bunch of tackles. But his quickness, shiftiness definitely could be used in this offense. And then, of course, guys like Tay McWilliams and Quaylon Jones, they just need to continue to not only get better and improve as young running backs, but also they need to continue to get healthy. That position really, in general, continue to get the work in, continue to progress, and continue to get healthy because they have a lot of talent in that room, but they need to be able to put it all together because I do think Jeff Grimes and the staff really do want to be able to run the football successfully.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. Haven't heard much about the running backs behind Ebner and Smith, really. I mean, I've heard little to nothing about Tay McWilliams or Quaylon Jones or any of those guys. Now, granted, our media sessions now, I mean, Aranda can go on about a question or two, and then he's just kind of not, I don't know if it's even evasive is the right word, but asking about Craig Williams' injury. He's not totally open about that. And So therefore, it leads to like sometimes just not asking a question. So like it's just never really presented itself an opportunity to ask like, how about the backup running backs? Just because it's just not been a thing. So I don't know like where they are in their progressions or any of that. But elsewhere, I mean, I think everybody feels pretty good about the tight ends. We talked about the O-line. The receiver room, obviously, we got to talk to them last week, and they seem to be in pretty good spirits, and why not? They got an awfully deep group, that wide receiving core.
Yeah, they do. I think it's very talented. Again, they just need to continue to progress the young guys, develop them, make them really continue to make them special players. Because I think if you look at the talent in the room, Hal Presley, Javon Gibson, Cameron Bonner, Monterey Baldwin had a good scrimmage over the weekend, scored a couple touchdowns, Elijah Bean. Those are guys who I do think could end up being kind of the future of that position. And I know that's obvious to say, but I think they really bring a high ceiling to the future of the wide receiver room. And I'm excited to continue to see them progress. I do think this wide receiving core, you got R.J. Sneed and you got Tyquan Thornton. And you also have Josh Fleeks, and you have other guys mixed in there. But I will say, I think that the ceiling of this group and how deep this group is going to be is really, in my opinion, going to come down to Drew Estrada and Jalen Ellis. Because I think Sneed and Thornton, you know what you're getting from them. Fleeks as well. I think you know what you're getting from Josh Fleeks at this point in his career. But I think Drew Estrada and Jalen Ellis are the guys, depth-wise, and guys who just bring a different skill set to the table, to this wide receiver room. And so I think they can really be the difference between this being an okay unit to being, a top 4 unit in the Big 12, maybe even top 3. And so we'll see. We'll see if they can live up to that and if they can help out the quarterbacks continue to progress, because Tyquan and Sneed are going to get a whole lot of attention from Big 12 defenses this year, so they need other weapons to emerge.
Well, and they themselves need to be a lot tougher, too. Tyquan in particular. They need to jump up and make the senior catches and make the senior plays and not be, more along the lines of like sophomores again at this point. I mean, last year I just think that group got toyed with, played with, out-muscled, didn't have a lot of opportunities, didn't take advantage of every opportunity that they did have. Like, that was just a forgettable year for the wide receivers for the most part. And Tyquan Thornton, like, totally irrelevant, basically. Yeah. Sneed had a few plays, and that was about, like, all she wrote for the entire unit. So, yeah, that's got to change immensely this year. Like, they're going to have to, if the offense is in a rut, they're going to have some guys that jump up and make something happen to spark somebody. And, we could go back to this podcast from 3 years ago, and everybody was whining about Matt Rule, Jersey this and Jersey that. And I remember saying the offseason between, 1-11 and 7-6, like, look, I get like the coaching, coaching's not perfect, but like at some point the players have to have responsibility. And that's kind of what I feel this year. It's like you've got so many veterans and so much experience, and they've changed everything to make it better because clearly a lot of things weren't working last year. Like, I can't imagine that they have not approached every area imaginable at this point, to retool it or revamp it or whatever. So to me, like, the coaching's there, the relationships are there, the communication seems to be there, the weightlifting is there now again. Like, this is on the players. Yes, there is going to be a lot of this on the coaches as well. Jeff Grimes needs to make good offensive play calls. But when you've got this many seniors on offense and defense, and yeah, you got a starting quarterback question, and your O-line, like the O-line, I'm not even going to mention them anymore. Like, it's a foregone conclusion. They're going to be something that needs to be worked on. So I'm not even going to mention them anymore. But like, you got this much experience. Your dadgum seniors need to step up, and do something about it. And so that room especially has got a lot of veterans in it, and they need to, in my opinion, take a big giant step up this year.
They do. They got to help the quarterback out.
Yeah,
they got to get open quicker,
catch the ball,
catch the football. RJ I think was very good at making contested catches last year, and he was the most
even
consistent.
If they weren't even that contested, he made it look like that.
He sure did. Yeah, I think they need more guys to emerge. They need that depth to continue, and some splash plays here and there from those guys would be very nice.
Yep. So there the offense kind of is. I mean, the tight end group is coming along as well. We talked a little bit to Ben Sims, a week or so ago. It's kind of becoming a blur now at this point. Fall camp, just all the interviews we've done, and I mean, it's been good. It's just a lot of information to process, and now I'm just kind of ready to empty my brain and watch football games and see actual performances and not a lot of, the offseason was great. Great offseason. I've heard it all now. I want to see how the offseason translates to the regular season, but it's been good, and we've had some good access, and there was more of a focus on the offense, but defense has had plenty to say as well. Is there anything else? I mean, Aranda talked over the weekend. Anything that stands out to you that we have not touched on yet?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there was anything too memorable from talking to the coaches this week, because they were talking a lot about veteran guys and guys that we've talked about ad nauseum. The defense can be really good. My expectations are through the roof for that group. I think they were really good last year, but I think this year there's going to be there is a clear buy-in, and there's a clear they're just comfortable in this scheme now, and I'm seeing young guys emerge. I'm hearing that, a lot of the older guys are taking steps up, and there's a lot of talent. And I think overall, Baylor fans should be very excited about what's going to happen with this defense. I think they're going to be stout. I think they have an opportunity to be a top 10 defense, much like the 2019 team. And based on the first scrimmage, they look like a group that is already ready for the season to begin, which is a welcome sign, I think, for anyone. And that's why a lot of people have high hopes for them this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, the defense was good enough for them to be a bowl team last year. But the offense, everybody was a bowl team last year, but I think you know what I'm saying. But the offense just wasn't up to snuff. Defense should be even better, so they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. The offense is going to be better because I believe it, and because it's hard to believe that it would be worse. So I think that's going to lead to improvement. But I know I'm really excited to see this defense in particular, and probably have to, win them some games this year because you can't necessarily rely on the other side to get the job done. I think they did that last year at times, and you know how that worked out. So I think, you almost got to be the one to make the play and then finish the job as well. And the defense seems prepared to do that if they need to, and they're talent-laden, and they're going to be a really fun unit to watch. So football practices roll along for at least the next few days, and then it's going to turn into a full-blown game week. But that's sort of where we are right now. No starting quarterback still, and just things kind of moving on along. Elsewhere, Baylor basketball is taking over Summer League. They've got some great representation and great news for Scott Drew's program. It's had a full offseason of good news, but MaCio Teague officially signed with the Utah Jazz a couple of days back. Of course, they also drafted Jared Butler this offseason. They announced his signing on, I think it was Sunday. He has been averaging 15.9 points and nearly 50% shooting from the field, along with 4 rebounds and 1 point, or actually it's from his senior year. Thank you, Jazz press release. He's been playing well in the summer. Why are you giving me his Baylor stats? Give me his Jazz stats and why you signed him, morons. I have no idea what his stats are with the Jazz, but his Baylor stats were good. Spoiler. Anyways, he signed with the Utah Jazz. Good for MaCio Teague, Grayson.
Yeah, from what I'm reading, he averaged 15 points per game in 22.8 minutes in Vegas, the Vegas part of the Summer League. Had a 26-point performance against the Spurs, and he's just been scoring well, which does not shock me at all. But I will say that I don't think he's getting signed just because he's putting the ball in the bucket. I think he's playing good defense, playing good team basketball, a veteran kind of guy, and also the fact that the Jazz know his game very well. They've been able to see him quite a bit with Dennis Lindsey over there, and Jake Lindsey, of course, also. They know his game, know what he can do, and I'm really happy for MaCio. And of all the guys who, were kind of on the lower side of could they get signed, he was the most obvious to potentially get signed between he and Mark Vidal. So happy for him. Jared Butler, also with the Jazz, got his officially signed with the Jazz, which I was excited to hear that as well, because, I was just nervous because I wanted to see him sign somewhere because, with the way the draft went, I just was very cautiously optimistic about what could happen. So 2 Baylor Bears on the Utah Jazz. That's going to be a really exciting time for those 2 guys, and they might be playing in the G League together.
Yeah, very well could be. Tonight, Davion Mitchell and the Kings will be playing for the Summer League Championship. He has really injected some new life into the Kings organization. They've already talked about the improvements that the team's made on defense just as a result of really feeding off of him and his energy and his way of doing things. So, he's a culture changer in the best type of a way, and that's led the Kings to playing for a Summer League title later on tonight at 5 o'clock on ESPN. So that prime time NBA Summer League Championship game, 5 p.m., But, it will be Davion Mitchell and the Kings against the Boston Celtics. So tune into that if you'd like. And Mitchell's had himself a very good summer league, and that's been the case for a lot of Baylor players. I mean, not only MaCio Teague, which has led to a contract, Ish Wainwright also signing with the Raptors a few days ago. He's been another great story for them. He's got a lot of people in Toronto rooting for him because of his story of, playing in Europe, and he had a very, heartfelt post-game interview last week that really endeared him to a lot of people, talking about the grind of playing overseas and then how that, led him to the NBA where he wants to stay. He's been through all that hard time. He wants to be in the NBA, and so he's doing what he can to stay there. So, between Teague and Wainwright and Davion Mitchell and Jared Butler, this is the perfect storm of just being in the news and getting attention and, being on the front lines of just, remaining relevant. Baylor basketball is very much a relevant product right now, and that's extending to the NBA more so than it ever has before.
Yeah, and I'm really excited for these guys. And obviously Davion is the headline, but Baylor in general, just their ability to get guys into the pros, even guys who weren't highly rated, is very intriguing, and they're going to have a bunch more after this year. It just is going to continue to roll for Scott Drew and company and for the players at Baylor. So it's been an impressive ride for sure over the past year, but this is just the beginning.
Yeah, if there was a knock on Scott Drew and staff, everybody's made their knocks or whatever over the years, and not really a whole lot to knock now. But you could say there for a little while, especially after like the Isaiah Austin, Corey Jefferson tenure, there just wasn't a lot of great NBA representation. Like eventually got Taurean Prince in there, but he's just sort of lasted. He's not really been impactful. And outside of that, like there really wasn't a whole lot. And now it's turned into, Isaiah Austin was able to play basketball again, so that's great. But he's, been overseas the last few years. Prince is still kicking around the league. But now you got like this whole new wave of guys that could potentially go from, you having a couple guys in the league, like real players in the league, to maybe a handful of guys here pretty soon. And then, like you said, there's more guys coming in, and you build this thing up, and next thing you know, you look up 10 years from now and you've got like 15 NBA guys and, 5 veterans and, all that. And that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the issue really for, I think, a few years in there was their best players weren't really doing much in the league. So like Perry Jones and Quincy Miller and Lace Darius Dunn and Tweety Carter, they just didn't really make a huge impact in the league.
Corey Jefferson.
Yeah, Corey as well. So I'm happy to see this, and hopefully, a guy like Davion can really, ascend into one of, the better players in the league, maybe an all-star type guy. Maybe Jared Butler can get to that point as well. But yeah, it's an exciting time for Baylor basketball, as we've noted multiple times coming off their national championship victory.
Yeah, been a pretty good year for Scott Drew and staff. So they had a really cool picture, if you haven't seen it, of all the Summer League guys there at dinner with Scott Drew and John Jagus. Did you see that? Mm-hmm. It's like Freddie and just the whole crew. Davion, Jared, like all those guys out to dinner. Probably the most expensive dinner. There you go. Armstrong's got it pulled up. Really cool picture. Jake Lindsey's in there. What was it? Austin Mills, I think, is in there.
Yeah, who's actually calling games right now at Summer League. I saw some clips of him doing that, so that's interesting. And yeah, there's some good names. Is that Jake? Yeah, Jake Lindsey on there. Yeah. MaCio and Jared Butler.
Yep, MaCio, Jared Butler, Freddie Gillespie. I think Oba Mokiki's in there. I think it's the whole crew from the last couple years. And, like nearly every one of those guys in that picture is in the NBA Summer League right now, or like Lindsey's case and Mills's case, like working in the NBA. So yeah, I mean, what a ride it's been here as of late for Baylor men's basketball. That's a pretty cool group shot. That's an all-timer right there, and would love to see where that is in about 2 years and how many more bodies have joined that picture and where the bodies that are in that picture right now are in a couple years, especially, a Davion and the hope that there is for him in Sacramento. So cool picture. Definitely press like on that one, or bookmark at least. Yeah. I don't really like tweets anymore.
Take a screenshot.
I just bookmark a screenshot, yeah. But there's some basketball for you. Elsewhere, everything's just kind of just the craziness of rumors of realignment and all that. Nothing substantial to get into on that front this week. Just nothing concrete that's anything more than just rumor. We'll save that for the afternoon radio show, all the realignment rumors. But Grayson, we do have a mailbag to get into. So anything before we get into that?
No, let's dive in. We got a few good questions this week.
AF Blue 82, though there's been less emphasis on single digits with the new staff, it does seem like something they'll continue to honor, assuming everyone who has a single digit keeps theirs. That leaves 5 and 7 up for grabs. Who do you think gets the last 2 single digits, and when do you think it's announced? And yeah, actually last week, or maybe even 2 weeks ago, crossed my mind about I saw, players who were wearing those single digits last year wearing them at practice already, and just assumed that maybe that's something they phased out a little bit or just not putting as much emphasis on. And quite frankly, I just haven't had the energy to ask about it because when talking to Dave Aranda, there's just other stuff that seems more important. Like the single jersey stuff is cool. It was a great thing that rule started here at Baylor, especially at the time. It was kind of needed something to rally around. I don't know exactly where it is in their plans now, but I did like it as a tradition, but I'm also totally fine if it's not something that's like a yearly thing, like it was the last couple of years, even though I know a lot of people enjoyed that. It's whatever to me, but who do you think gets the last 2 single digits, and when do you think it's announced? I don't know that it'll be announced because none of the other ones were if they retained them. So, again, I don't know how much of a big deal they're making out of the single digits at this point.
Yeah, last year was really fun because they did the tweets each day. I thought that was really cool, so I'm kind of surprised that they're maybe not doing that this year. I
just assume like they're not because, there's only 2 spots. Everybody else just inherited theirs from last year. So
so that leads to my next, I guess, question I have about it is, okay, so are these single digit numbers going to go to guys who earned it, or is it just whoever wants these numbers gets it? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to go off the assumption that the guys earned these jerseys through, the offseason conditioning, things like that. So I guess I'll go with maybe Dylan Doyle seems like a good one at this point. And then the other one I'll go with, how about JT Woods? How about those 2? The other one that I would love to happen is if one of the quarterbacks, whoever wins the job, earned one. That would be cool to see as well. I know everyone made a big deal about that for Charlie Brewer, and that didn't work out very well. I think Charlie Brewer in 12 is much better than Charlie Brewer in 5. But, if one of them can earn it, that would be cool as well to see.
Yeah, so I don't know where they are on that. If opportunity presents itself to ask Aranda about that, if there's not like something else that is of more interest. But I know this is of interest to a lot of people. Like I said, it was a big deal with Rule for, the couple years he was here. And then even with Aranda last year, it was just something for people to get excited about. But, yeah, it's just kind of not been a thing. So we'll check on that. But I like, pretty much all the best candidates already have it. So JT Woods makes sense. Anybody along those lines, anybody who's like a senior defender, that's proven some stuff over the last couple of years, I think is a prime candidate for that. But yeah, I don't know what they're doing exactly with the remaining digits. Maybe they are saving one for the starting quarterback. Who knows? AF Blue again, QB1 and starting O-line battles obviously lead fall camp storylines, but what under-the-radar position battles do you think are worth mentioning outside of those 2 groups? Any specific players outside of quarterback and O-line really emerging and pushing their way up the depth chart for some early fall playing time?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just start with position battles, and I'll kind of go through the ones that I find to be the most intriguing, I guess. So the third wide receiver spot. Josh Fleeks, Drew Estrada are probably the lead candidates to take over that position. I think Jalen Ellis has a case as well, even though his role seems like it's going to be more on the outside receiver instead of the inside, which might keep him off the field. But yeah, that battle is one to definitely watch. I think they have good candidates for it. If Gavin Holmes comes back healthy as well, he could be another one to contend for that spot. Also, that's pretty much it on offense. I think everyone else has pretty much locked in a role outside of quarterback and offensive line. I think it's going to be a committee thing with Ebner and Smith. It wouldn't be fair to say that one is the starting running back because they're both going to get a ton of touches and kind of be the primary ball carrier for stretches. On the defensive side, though, it's a little interesting. So Siaki Ika definitely has the nose tackle spot, but Cole Maxwell and Braden Utley were listed as the starting defensive end and defensive tackle on the first depth chart in the spring. I
don't believe that.
I don't believe it for 1 second. So first of all, TJ Franklin, I would be shocked if he's not starting when the season begins. The other one is Gabe Hall. Gabe is a little bit more iffy in my opinion, but TJ Franklin, I think he's going to be a starter for this team, with Gabe Hall also potentially fighting for a spot, but they're going to have to fight for it. Obviously, they weren't listed in the group. The other position that I need to mention is the jack position, because it's kind of the biggest mystery, in my opinion, on the defensive side. And the reason why I say that is because the guy who's listed as the starter, Ashton Logan, very solid player, but I think you know what you're getting with Ashton. I see a high floor, but I don't see a particularly high ceiling. Now, maybe year two in the defense, that changes. But for guys like Garmin Randolph, Victor Obi, Anthony and Yanwu, and Tyrone Brown, I mean, it is a battle. And with Garmin's been out for a little bit, dealing with injuries, trying to get himself healthy. It's led to opportunities for a guy like Anthony and Yanwu to really shine. And so I'm very curious to see how that position unfolds. I think it could end up being a committee approach for the jack linebacker spot, where they play a lot of guys for different situations, which I think would be very interesting as well. So those are the main ones. I think if you look around the rest of the defense, it's more backup roles that are being contested, but those are the main starting positions up for grabs. And I guess I know a lot of people keep asking me this, but also John Mayers and Noah Rauschenberg, who's going to be the field goal kicker, because I have not heard great things about the kicking unit so far during fall. So hopefully that changes.
Okay, I haven't heard anything about special teams, and I was actually wondering that myself. But how could you have a bad fall camp as kickers?
You would think that'd be near impossible.
How is that possible? How do you have a bad fall camp?
Yeah,
as a kicker.
Yeah, I have not heard great things. I've heard a lot of you
either make them or you don't. Yeah. So that means that if you've had a bad fall camp, you're missing it more than you're making it. So what exactly have you been doing this entire time? Of all the positions that doesn't have the COVID protocol excuse or the the chemistry, you line up and kick the ball. I mean, it changes somewhat depending on the circumstances, but unlike if you play safety or quarterback or what, where you have to have people around you to be able to do your job. Okay, you need a holder. Outside of that, you don't even need that to practice all day.
Now, it could be depth issues, but I have not heard glaring, great things.
I hope it's a minor thing that seems like because if there's an issue with that, I just don't understand how there's an issue with that. You know what I'm saying? So that's interesting because, I've been wondering about special teams myself. So hopefully that's not as bad as it sounds, or, that's just a bad week or something, because I just don't understand how you couldn't. I don't know. Am I tripping here?
No, you're not.
Yeah, I just don't understand how that's difficult,
especially because they have veteran guys.
Yeah, it's juniors and seniors who've been doing this the entire time. Right. How could you have a bad camp?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we'll see how that goes. But man, that might be an all-timer of a podcast rant if they line up in San Marcos and they're whiffing. I might just go insane. Honestly. All right. I agree with you on the position battles. Everything's pretty much locked up. It's if you take away quarterback and O-line, it's Jack, and it's maybe one other spot really, but that's about it. Scotty B. Baylor King, how much will the run defense improve in terms of yards this year, considering we did give up a little over 180 per game last year?
Yeah, I think they'll improve a lot. Adding Siaki Ika, hopefully a healthy Gabe Hall, and TJ Franklin for that matter. I don't think he was fully healthy the whole year either. So Last year, they were 82nd in the nation, giving up right around 180 yards per game. I think they can get that inside 130. Around that 130, 125 mark, which would put them right around top 25 in run defense. I still think they'll give up some yards just because I think this defense in general is still similar to Matt Rule's, where it's bend but don't break, and then also force a bunch of turnovers. I think that's kind of the mantra, at least from what we saw a year ago. So I think they'll give up some yards, but I think at the end of the day, this can be, like I said, a really stout defense. I think the run defense is going to improve drastically from a year ago.
If you had to say reasons why Baylor can still make it in the Pac-12, what would those be? I appreciate it and sick 'em.
I mean, just the merger ideas, the Pac-12 deciding that they need to make a push to try to add teams. I think those would be the main reasons, just to try to keep up with the Joneses, keep up with the SEC. But yeah, I don't know if it's the best cultural fit. Actually, I do know it's probably not. It's probably the worst cultural fit of all the conferences that they could be in. But yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen. I think a schedule alliance is more likely at this point than a full-on merger.
Yeah, and if it's Big 12, nothing seems likely at this point, honestly, because even the scheduling alliances you're getting left out of at this stage. Although, there's a fresh batch of rumors, so believe what you want about where things stand. But state reasons why they can make it. I mean, I think they can make it because they're competitive, but I don't even want to delve into it because I think it's unlikely because of the religious reasons and because of just the snootiness of the Pac-12. So, I mean, they could make it, but the reasons why would be the Pac-12 completely changes their mentality on the way they've always believed. That's what that would be. So if that happens, then, hey, go Baylor to the Pac-12. But unless that happens, that's all that could happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Stat Boy, what will be Baylor football's closest game this season, win or loss? Appreciate all of y'all's work. Thank you.
That's a really tough one because I think they're going to be involved in quite a few close games, which makes that a little difficult. I guess the two that really stand out to me that I think are going to be really close and are going to have a huge impact on how Baylor finishes the year are the game against Iowa State here in Waco. I think that's going to be a very close game. I do believe Baylor will lose that game, but I think it will be very close, probably within at least a score, maybe within 3 points as well. And then the other one is at Kansas State at the end of the year. I think Kansas State's going to be a bowl team. I don't think they're going to be great, but it's hard to play in Manhattan. I think they're going to be solid enough to get up for that game and make things pretty difficult for Baylor. Baylor's had their number over the years, and I think that's another kind of bulletin board material for them heading into that game, and I think that's going to be a really good one, but I believe Baylor will win that one. So a win and a loss, close games, but there's quite a few on that list.
I mean, I'm looking at the schedule, and they could all be the exact same.
Yeah.
I'll just say, for an answer's sake, West Virginia, that's always a tight game. It's in Waco, and it's following, a trip to Stillwater, and it's following Oklahoma State and Iowa State. Those are two pretty big games back-to-back, so that West Virginia one's going to they're going to start off probably 3-0, and then could very well go to 3-2. And so that's going to be a very key game, that West Virginia game, because either you're going to go 3-2 to 3-3, or you're going to go 3-2 to 4-2. Best case, you're 4-1 entering that game. So that, that's any way you look at it, really, that's like a turning point game of going and flirting with bowl eligibility, or being full on, we're going to a bowl game. It's just a matter of how many games we do win. You know what I mean?
Because if you start 3-3 with a schedule coming up of BYU, Texas, at TCU, Oklahoma, at Kansas State coming up, you could very well find yourself well outside of a bowl game if you lose that one.
You have to be 3-0. You have to be.
Yes.
No excuses 3-0.
You have to be 4-2.
And then you have to be at least 4-2, or it could get really dicey. So I'm looking at that West Virginia game as a big kind of turning point, one way or the other in the season. C. Mitness, which home games are you most excited for this season? We got some exciting home games scheduled over the next few years. Which game would you most like to travel for?
Yeah, this is the best home schedule you're really going to get. Getting Iowa State, Oklahoma, and Texas all at home, that's fun. That's two top 10 teams. Texas, obviously, that's just a big game in general. Texas Tech is at home as well, which will be a lot of fun. I know, kind of a rivalry game there. And then the BYU game non-conference game as well. So the one that I'm most excited about, though, I would say is probably that Texas game. I think that's going to be a really exciting one. They've had Baylor's number in recent history, and Baylor needs to get a win, and I think this is a perfect year for that. So I'll go with that one. As far as future games, the one I'm most excited for is Oregon. That's not till 2028, but that would be a lot of fun to go to. I know the Auburn in 2026 is another one that I'm sure everyone's very excited about as well.
Yeah, as far as the games, the one I'd most like to go to would be to Autzen. I've never been to that part of the country. It's really the only part of the country other than New England. I've been to New York, but I've not really been to New England. So, yeah, the two, Northeast, Northwest, it's kind of where I have not gone in this country. So I think Eugene would be cool, and I'm just very much an outdoorsy type of person. Nature puts me at peace, and that's a really beautiful part of the country. So I think I'd enjoy it out there, just the scenery and whatnot. So, yeah, definitely Eugene. As far as the home games, I mean, they're all fun. I think Iowa State's going to be really interesting early on, especially if Baylor's like 3-0 going into that like they should be. Now, granted, if they are like a rickety 3-0, maybe there's not a ton of excitement, but if they're like a convincing 3-0, then there should be a lot of anticipation for that Iowa State game. But I'll go with Oklahoma just because it's maybe the last time we're going to see them in McLean Stadium. And, I get that that's the case with Texas as well, but whatever. For me, Oklahoma and perhaps the last trip to McLean's definitely one to circle. So maybe that won't be the case, but probably is because, again, the return trip wouldn't be for another 2 years, and I just can't imagine Oklahoma in 2023 still being in the Big 12, but hey, who knows? So good news is that anybody who's looking for a pick of the best home games got quite the selection to choose from. Thank you, C. Marine Bear, can you please provide a list and any updates on current team injuries?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably not going to dive into every single injury that I've heard. I know a lot of
I can't tell you anything from media sessions. They don't tell us squat. Right. Like, they don't tell us anything about injuries.
Yeah. So we'll save that probably for the premium side. I know some guys are working back from injuries that are already known, but I'll probably save that for the premium side.
All right, so that will be for the premium subscribers, just sensitive information like injuries. But, yeah, I mean, if there was something that Dave Aranda was willing to pass along and just say, I'd have tweeted it out or something. But, ask about, like, Craig Williams, and it's just, like, a total non-answer to, like, if he's healthy or not. So he's just – it's the kind of coach that's just not real big into, like, putting it all out there when it comes to injuries, and that's fine. But, yeah, look for the update at some point in the premium section. Baylor Okie, does it seem as if other Big 12 stadiums will be back at or near full capacity this season?
It sure does. I think everyone's pretty much on schedule for that. I know Baylor is right now. I mean, things. It's really weird. Things could change over the next week, next 2 weeks, very, very easily, unfortunately. So we'll see what happens, but I think everyone is hoping, or at least planning on, that they can go back to full capacity. I haven't heard any Big 12 school yet release that they're going to, do 50% or 75% quite yet.
Yeah, for the sake of just not completely imploding this podcast, we'll just stay away from COVID talk. But yeah, there's a risk that because of just what's happened, that there's always the risk that they could scale back because too many people are still getting sick or aren't vaccinated or whatever the case may be. But as of now, they're expecting full capacity. But we'll see. We see the last year how much things just change on a whim. Coach to Broker, what redshirt freshmen and true freshmen are having a notable fall camp?
Yeah, so I have kind of a little list of guys who have really excelled. So Devin Neal at the safety position is one. He's really done a nice job. I actually think there's a chance he gets mixed in with JT Woods and Christian Morgan a little bit, especially as the season progresses. He's had a great camp and is really turning into the player that I thought he could be coming out of high school. Just a very good athlete and continuing to rise.
He was the only one that JT Woods mentioned by name when I asked JT about young players. Now, it wasn't a slight to anybody else. I just think there's a bunch of guys that they probably like. But, yeah, Devin Neal's definitely somebody who's stood out.
Yeah, another one who I've heard just raving just great things about is Anthony Nyanwu. And a big part of that is with Garmin Randolph being out for a little bit. He's had a nice opportunity to really excel and I think he's taken it and run with it. I thought he was going to be more raw as a prospect. I thought it would take him a little bit more time, but he really flashed, especially his senior year, and it just has translated really well. And so I could, again, see him having a role of some kind at the jack linebacker spot. I don't think he'll be the full-time starter, but I think he'll have a role.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about him. I mean, Joey McGuire's been really positive about him. Like last week, I wrote an article, and somebody asked me why I didn't include Anthony and Nyanwu in like the 5 most anticipated defensive player, or whatever. It's because Garmin Randolph had moved there, and then I didn't know at the time that he's banged up, but at this point in his career, I should just assume that he is. Quite honestly, him and Gabe Hall, I just assume that they're injured all the time, but. Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, maybe that if I had known that, I'd have gone with Anyanwu. But if that's the case, then that'd be great. I mean, they need somebody to establish themselves. Like if there's a weak link, so to speak, on the defense, it's that spot. I mean, it's the only spot that is really, for the most part, not locked down other than like one DN spot.
Yeah, now to be clear, I think if Garmin Randolph is healthy, he is the best jack linebacker.
Yeah,
I think he's the guy. So I don't think you're off.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, in terms of, like, to start the season, if Randolph's not available, then maybe I would have included, to mention that. But no, I mean, I still feel confident in what I was saying. And I still think Anyan was going to be a good player. So, yeah, definitely keep an eye out for him, especially the more opportunities that he does get. And there's a lot of excitement about the young guys, especially on defense, but offensively as well. But yeah, I think it's going to be fun to see which one of those guys emerge. Devin Neal, definitely. Somebody we haven't heard a lot about this fall, but we heard a ton about in the spring was Lorando Johnson. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure.
He's on my list as well. He's one I was going to name, and actually the guy who's technically his backup as well, Devin Lemire.
Yes.
It seems like both of those guys have really just taken big steps. Yeah. Lorando more so in the spring, and I would say Devin more so in the fall. So very intrigued. And, I mean, that's a heck of a backup position right behind Jalen Petrie. You're getting to learn a whole lot, and that's a position where you're put in a great spot to make a lot of plays. So those 2 guys were also on my list as well as guys who have emerged. I have a couple more. Tyrone M. Brown at the linebacker spot. I think he'll be the starter next year at linebacker. He'll probably take over Terrell Bernard's spot, I think. I just think he's a difference maker. And he looked like it as a recruit. He continues to look like it. Chateau Reed, I think, is another one that has to be mentioned at cornerback. On the offensive side, unfortunately, I only have 2 names, really. And, that's kind of a bummer, but it's also just kind of where they're at right now. Micah Maskua. Very curious to see if he can make a rise. And then Javon Gibson, who has had a really nice spring, but an even better fall camp. I think he's the most likely freshman to have an impact, even though I do think Hal Presley could end up being the best of the group. He just obviously late to the party a little bit.
Yeah, if you've read one of my more recent articles, I mentioned Maskua and kind of the hopes for him, and he's definitely a guy that I think has a bright future if he just continues to improve and, stay focused on all those things. So he's definitely, and yeah, I'm very curious about the younger wideouts. I don't know how many opportunities they're actually going to get this year just because there's only one football to go around and you've got like 6 seniors that are all capable. But, for those guys who are able to carve out a little bit of a niche, the Jalen Ellises, the Javon Gibsons, the whoever else you want to throw in that, Hal Presley, who will take advantage of their opportunities. And yeah, they're all great candidates. So definitely not a lot to look at on the offensive side and think that there's like big notable fall performances outside of just what you would expect. But there's been a few on both sides that kind of get you excited about next spring ball almost already. But obviously a long way to go till we get to that point. But man, this team is loaded for bear, no pun intended, in many positions, but definitely a question mark at a couple of the most important ones, at quarterback and O-line. So now a week away from our first official game podcast, game week podcast of the year. That'll be coming up next week as we will preview Texas State. And
wait, we're 2 weeks away, aren't we? Next week?
They're
2 weeks, yeah.
2 weeks away, yeah. 2 weeks away from Texas State. So yeah, almost there.
Yeah, almost there. I'm excited for that. Craig, I gotta tell you, I'm looking through my prediction thread that I make every week. I picked Baylor to lose to Iowa State this week in week 4. And I am getting a lot of blowback from the community that I made a horrible decision in picking that to be a loss. So I guess there's a lot of people who think Baylor's going to go 12-0 this year.
Yeah, well, that'd be greght. That'd be awesome.
A 3-point loss. Just I wasn't to a top 5 team. Just
yeah. I'm picking that as a loss as well. So send your angry emails wherever you want to. I'm not responding to them, but yeah, as of right now, I'm pegging that as a loss. I'm pegging that as their first loss of the year, as a matter of fact. But I would love. I mean, if not for Oklahoma and Texas shenanigans, like Texas will probably always be my number one in terms of just the team beat. Because like even if you have a bad year but you beat them, you can at least be like, hey, I still beat you guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's that factor. But, you know, take OU and Texas hijinks out of the way. Iowa State's the top of my list of the team I want to see them beat. And maybe more so than Oklahoma, actually. Yeah, I mean, they'd be right there like 1B with Texas.
We started this podcast in 2018, and I have never heard you talk about a team more with disdain than Iowa State.
Yeah.
So I believe it. You hate Iowa State. I
don't hate Iowa State.
Okay,
I don't like some of their fans, but I mean, if I spend enough time online, I could say that for every fan base because they're all pretty much the same. But yeah, I felt like Iowa State fans got really in their feelings about, you know, Baylor's quick rise back from penalty, and they didn't like that their little spot that they had thought that they had found was occupied once again by someone else. Yeah. And that really made them angry. Oh my God, I can't believe that we went all this time without talking about the big news of last week. And I can't believe that with the big news of last week, I didn't go and just look at Iowa State message boards to see their reaction to the lack of penalties for Baylor after the NCAA penalties case. Like all that talk for 5 years, and we do a whole podcast and don't even bring it up. Yeah. Like that's how much of a dud that announcement was. Yeah, like, dude, honest to God, I just now thought of that.
Yeah, and we
just now thought of that. We talked for an hour and a half practically. Armstrong's going to kill us if we don't go soon. But yeah, the whole NCAA decision came down, and
that little nugget.
And I can't believe I didn't go spend like hours on Iowa State message boards to just intake all that salt that I can imagine was out there. But in all seriousness, they got a lot of good fans, and that's cool. But dude, yeah, the NCAA decision. I mean, it's just like once it finally happened, I was just like so relieved that it was over. Like it's already off my plate. For as much time as there was to think about it and for some people to worry about it and all, like it's just like once it was over, it's like, okay, goodbye. Yeah. Out of my life forever. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, so I'll go through it really quick for those who just kind of want to get caught up on it. I have some thoughts, especially on the recruiting side of it. But 4-year probation, again, that's just they're going to be monitored. Yeah, obviously.
Just don't screw up.
Don't screw up. Yeah, $5,000 fine. Okay, well, hopefully when they get the $36 million back, they're able to cover that $5,000. The other one's reduction to 30 football official visits during the 2021-2022 academic year. That's a key note because that means it only runs till the end of July of next year. So for a lot of people who are thinking, oh, that's only 30 official visits for the 2022 class, that's not the case. So they get to, so 2022, they'll get to finish that. They already have 20 commits, so they'll probably use maybe 5 to 10 more official visits to end the year for that class. And then next spring, they'll have a time period in there where they'll have 20 official visits left that they can use on the 2023 class. And yeah, maybe you would like to have more, but then once the penalty's up at the end of July, then they'll have the full slate to finish out the class. So they're going to be fine. I would not look into that too much. It really won't impact them much at all, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's wild, like all that weight, and yeah, I mean, even the MailBag didn't even have a mention of it. Like MailBag didn't mention it, so you guys weren't thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about it any longer. Max Olson, we had him on yesterday, and he was like, it just makes you wonder, like, why it took all this time if they knew the entire time there was nothing there for them to even penalize, which is what we've talked about before, and was always a curious question of, like, okay, well, on the surface there doesn't appear anything, but, like, what do they find in uncovering everything, which is what you assumed was taking the longest part, along with all the legalities that were playing out. And, yeah, just a big ball of nothing, really, and just... Yeah,
absolutely nothing. So I'll just finish these off. 3-week ban from unofficial visits that during the same academic calendar. That's, again, not that big of a deal. It's just, it does take time away, but not that bad. 2-week ban on football recruiting communication. They'll have to go silent during an open period, which is unfortunate. But again, it's very recoverable. It should be fine, again, since it lasts through July. And then, or at some point in July, through the end of July, they'll have that penalty. Reduction of football evaluation days during the fall by 3, by 10 during the spring. 5-year show cause order, which, again, that doesn't impact anyone at Baylor. And then the show cause.
I don't think that's anything to do with Baylor.
Nothing to do with Baylor. And then a vacation of all records in which student athletes competed while ineligible. Come to find out, that is going to be a 2011 penalty in which I believe they'll lose, 5 to 7 games in 2011, but it does not impact the Big 12 championships that they won in 2013 and 2014. So again, Baylor really, again, the NCAA didn't have a whole lot to go off of. We've talked about this a ton, how this took such a long time for a decision that really feels like was pretty simple from the very beginning.
Yeah, just mind-boggling that it took as long as it did. I'm sure there are reasons for why, but a whole lot of talk in the lead-up to just ultimately be a big nothing burger and not even enough to remember at the start of this podcast. That big NCAA decision never even crossed my mind till we're an hour plus into this thing. That's how much of a dud it was. Think about that. After all that worry for 5 years. But, hey, at least it's a relief. There's a resolution now. Dave Aranda knows what to do moving forward. The players know what's up moving forward. The recruits know now who's lying, who's been telling them that Baylor's getting the death penalty. Tom Herman, not that you matter anymore, but several others as well, but him for sure. So all that's out the window. And just go win some games this year, and everything's pretty good, and find out a conference to play in, and everything's really great, and the future's stable and sturdy, but still a couple weeks to go. Almost there, though, for fall camp to break and actual football to be played. So looking forward to that. All right, Grayson, anything before we go, man?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Another exciting week and a big scrimmage coming up this weekend. It's going to be a massive one, so definitely pay attention to the premium side of things. We'll have all kinds of content, news, and notes coming up, and obviously Sikkim 365 Radio as well from 3 to 6 every single day.
Yep, every day, Monday through Friday, and we've got that. We've got articles. We've got podcasts. We've got all sorts of stuff. So if you are already a member of Sikkim 365's premium section, thank you. If you're not, and you want to know how to help us out and you want more great content, then you can help out by becoming a member. And if not, gift a membership to somebody. But growing the premium section is the way that we'll grow the content and the brand. And I think we're already doing a pretty good job of that. And a big part of that is you, the users and members out there. So we do thank y'all. But until next time, we'll have a lot more to talk about next week. And then soon enough, the games themselves. But for Grayson Grundhafer, Armstrong and Jack behind the scenes, I'm Craig Smoke. This has been the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com.